Welcome to Integrity and Joy. I'm Steve Walker. This is episode 16 of Integrity and Joy, tackling difficult conversations with integrity without losing your cool. So welcome to Integrity and Joy. I am Steve Walker, former U.S. diplomat, activist, educator, and now life coach, meditation teacher, and podcaster. Welcome. Thanks for joining. If this is a return visit, thanks for coming back. Appreciate you supporting the podcast, and I hope you're following. And if this is your first time, welcome. And I hope you go back and listen to earlier episodes because we've had some really great, fascinating guests on and other important topics and themes that I think are really relevant to almost everybody's life. So definitely check them out. And please, of course, as always, rate and review, and let's get as many 5-star ratings as we can so that it gets in front of more people who could benefit from listening to the podcast. So thanks for that in advance. Today's topic is about difficult conversations, right? How to have them, both in terms of like how to get up the courage to have them and how to actually have the conversations. You know the feeling, right? You know, you can't sleep at night. You're anxious about having the conversation with somebody. You know, when it comes time to have it, your palms are sweaty, right? You're agitated. There's a lot of conversations that many of us dread having, and we avoid them. We put them off. We procrastinate. They don't go away, though, right? They're still there. The topic can fester. It can eat away at us, the other person, make things difficult and awkward in your relationship. And yet, you know, there's one study that says 70% of us avoid difficult conversations. Not a shock. Whether it's about a conflict or a potential conflict or needing to put some boundaries in place with somebody or giving someone feedback, right? That's something that a lot of people don't like, makes them feel uncomfortable. They avoid it. Not wanting to hurt people's feelings, being a people pleaser. Like these are all things that can contribute to us avoiding either for a time or entirely difficult but important conversations that we need to have. So let's get into it. Let's wade into how do we actually do this? Like how do we get up the courage? How do we shift our mindsets and be able to have them? And then what are some strategies for how we can actually have them in a way that hopefully, you know, leads the conversation to go as well as possible, and maybe even with an outcome that strengthens the relationship that's involved, right? That's in the middle of it. So we're going to talk about several different types of difficult conversations that we tend to avoid and yet are important to have. But let's first explore a little bit why we avoid difficult conversations. In some cases, it's because it involves a conflict, or we're afraid that the other person is going to get upset by the conversation, and that triggers a fear of judgment or rejection or abandonment, right? And if that's something that particularly is a sensitive area for you, for a lot of my life, has been, it's better now, but probably going back to being adopted and that fear of abandonment that kind of becomes innate. And maybe in particular, if you tend to be the kind of person who, you know, doesn't have the best self-esteem, finds it difficult to feel lovable, worthy, and so you look for validation from other people, this can be really challenging, right? Almost every challenging, difficult conversation feels like a landmine or a minefield even, that could, you know, ruin or end a relationship, or feel like a rejection of you on a fundamental level. So, you know, that's a big one, right? And, you know, one of the ways of dealing with that, in addition to, I think, feeling more confident about how to have the conversation, which we're going to talk about, but, you know, working on that inner validation, right? That self-validation, self-love, self-esteem. That's vital, right? So doing the work to, whether it's if there's a trauma or traumas from your past, from your childhood that you need to heal, going to see a therapist, getting some help with that, doing morning affirmations, journaling, meditation, loving kindness meditations can help with this. A lot of work around who you are and who you're trying to become, right? That foundational work that I do with a lot of my clients at the beginning of our work about what are your core values and what are your core beliefs and who are you trying to be as a human being, in the various roles that you play, as a coworker or a parent or a spouse or partner or a sibling or friend. Who are you? Who are you trying to be? Your best version of your authentic self. If you can get clarity about that and then start to take even just concrete baby steps every day to becoming that person, that can start to boost your self-esteem, your self-worth. You start to validate yourself from within, tending to your relationships, trying to be of service to other people. Those are all things that can build your self-esteem. And then you're going to be more resilient in dealing with these difficult situations, these difficult conversations. Sometimes we avoid the difficult conversation because it's an awkward or difficult topic, right? It's not necessarily about a conflict with the other person, but the very nature of the conversation is awkward or uncomfortable, or maybe there's a taboo that society or your family has kind of created around that topic. For a lot of people, money, finances is one of those kind of taboo, awkward, uncomfortable conversations. There are even people who, fall in love, get married, living together, and they never have the serious conversation about money, about what their core values are around money, and what their priorities are, and are they savers or not? How do they want to approach borrowing money? You name it, right? Are they going to put their money together in one bank account, and run their finances together as a team, or are they going to maintain separate finances to some extent? And either way can work, but you have to have that conversation, right? To see if your values and your habits and your practices and your mindsets align. But there are people who never have that conversation until maybe it becomes a crisis during their marriage or during their time living together. And so that's terrible, right? I mean, that's such a problem. And yet people avoid it because they get messages from their parents often when they're young that, like, you don't talk about money. I've had clients and students who would talk about how their parents wouldn't talk to them about money, how much money they made, what they save, how they set their priorities, what their financial goals are, where they invest their money, you name it. They don't talk about it. How do you pay your taxes, right? How do you fill out your tax return? None of it, because it was taboo. So in some cases it's that, and that I think you got to figure out, like, what is it? Is it something like that was kind of programmed into you? In which case you can work on changing your mindset, right? To realize that, like, no, this is actually something that's healthy to talk about, certainly at least with certain people in certain circumstances. Sex for a lot of people is an uncomfortable or awkward conversation, and yet, people don't have conversations about either, sexual history or testing for STDs when they're dating, or, once they're in a relationship, what they like, what they don't like. Like, some people never have those conversations, right? Or it's minimal because it feels awkward, it's intimidating, or they're afraid of rejection or afraid of being judged. And that's problematic, right? That can create problems, and it gets in the way also of more joy, right? And better communication and being able to to be more compatible and to do what each other wants and needs. So that's another topic that can be challenging for a lot of people. And then, sometimes it's about not wanting to hurt the other person's feelings, to make them feel uncomfortable, to upset them, right? Because we're people pleasers, or we're, avoidant of conflict because we had a lot of conflict in our family growing up. Our parents were arguing all the time. And so any situation where we feel like it's going to potentially either make the person feel bad, we're going to feel guilty about that, or create conflict or upset them in some way, hurt their feelings, we avoid that, right? Because we don't want to be reminded of those painful or scary or uncomfortable situations when we were a kid. And so we avoid again. And that could be anything about maybe potentially, something that someone did that upset you, or it could be about needing to give somebody feedback, right? Whether it's at work or at home, and so we avoid, right? So there are lots of different reasons. If you can identify what's kind of underlying your resistance to having the conversation, and try to address that root cause, that can help, right? Because it's probably going to come back up again and again. And again, that's something that if it's past trauma, therapist can help you with, and there are different approaches, therapeutic approaches to that. And then if it's about really trying to shift a mindset or a paradigm that you have that's becoming a limiting belief that's getting in the way, a therapist or a life coach can help you with that, right? So you may need to have some support. That's great. Get the support. And if it's something you can handle on your own, through some journaling, reflection, meditation, etc., then that's fantastic too, right? So now let's talk a little bit about the types of difficult conversations and how we might handle them better than we have in the past, and therefore feel more confident in having them. So let's talk first about ones that involve a conflict. Now, for the sake of this conversation, let's just assume it's a difficult conversation that has to happen between you and another person. There's a conflict between you and one other person. We know that conflicts can involve multiple people, and so that's a given. But it's really uncomfortable sometimes for us to have the difficult conversation, even when we're in the midst of the conflict, and the conflict is painful and uncomfortable and is harming the relationship or causing other damage in our lives. And yet we still sometimes avoid them because the idea of having a difficult conversation that could turn into a real argument, tempers flaring, anger, etc., is just horrifying to us. So we try to avoid it. But if we try to shift our mindset towards these difficult conversations that involve conflict, and use a strategy that will hopefully resolve the conflict to both people's satisfaction, then we can actually turn this conflict into an opportunity to build trust and strengthen the relationship, actually. We're afraid of having the conversation because we're afraid of the damage that's going to get done. And we have a paradigm usually of it's me against you, and one of us is probably going to win and one of us is probably going to lose, right? That's the way we tend to look at conflict, that there's a zero-sum game. There's a winner and there's a loser. And we then sometimes play this out in our heads and we go, okay, suppose I win, best case scenario, I win, the other person loses. They might be really pissed off and resentful and not forgive me and maybe even try and get revenge, right? And hold a grudge. And maybe it'll even severely damage or destroy the trust in the relationship, and maybe even the relationship itself. So we don't like that. And that's even the best case scenario, that we win. Then we think about, what if they win and I lose? Well, I'm going to feel bad, And I might be resentful. I might not trust that person anymore. I might get angry, right? I might want to get back at them, right? I might not want to be around them moving forward, right? So again, even in that situation, right? We're upset because we lose, and B, the other stuff still happens, right? Where there's damage done, there's a resentment, there's anger, right? There's damage done to the trust. So that's no good. Then there's the possibility of it being a lose-lose, that we can't even find a resolution to it, and we either kind of give up, or neither of us gets what we want out of it, and we're both angry, disgruntled, resentful, bitter, and that harms the relationship, right? And never mind that in trying to argue it out and trying to win, tempers can flare, name calling can happen, we can dredge up the past resentments and grudges that we've held against each other, right? It's terrible. I mean, it becomes a nightmare to try and resolve it, right? So we kind of, through that mindset about how conflicts work and how they get resolved, we kind of box ourselves into a corner where it feels like there really isn't much of a good outcome possible, and it just feels like it's going to be a disaster, right? But what if we looked at it differently? Because the reality is, with anybody that you have an important relationship, certainly anybody you love and care about, but even somebody, say, at work that you work with and you have an important relationship, why would you ever want to make them lose? Ever. Why? Like, you shouldn't want people that you care about to lose. And you shouldn't be wanting them to lose at your hand. Right? I mean, that makes no sense logically. If you care about somebody, if you care about a relationship, you want to build that relationship, you want to strengthen it, you want to deepen the trust, right? No matter what. So having a paradigm that there's going to be a winner and a loser, and we're on opposite sides, it is not supportive of wanting to take care of that relationship and strengthen it. So shift your mindset. Instead, see every conflict as a problem that you need to solve together, that you're on the same team, trying to solve the problem together. Now, the other person might initially kind of resist that mindset and, find it to be such a dissonance, right? I mean, it's so different than the way most of us look at conflict. But most people will eventually come around to that way of thinking, right? If you structure the conversation well, because in the end, it's going to make them feel safer. It's going to make them feel calmer. It's going to make them more open to trusting, to being vulnerable, right? Because you're making it clear from the beginning, I'm not against you. I'm not your opponent. I'm not your enemy. I care about you. I would even say this explicitly up front. I know we're having this conflict. I feel terribly about it. I care about you and I care about this relationship. And we're on the same team. I want to make that clear. We're going to solve this problem together. This is a problem that we are going to solve together. And I'm committed to doing that because I care about you and I care about this relationship. That in and of itself can help calm things down. The other person might be dysregulated at that point, right? They might be angry or afraid or upset in some other way, right? And so you saying right off the bat, look, I'm not in this to beat you, right? To win. I'm on your team. You're on my team. And this is a problem that we have together and we're going to solve it together. That's a radically different message. And that in and of itself can be a little bit shocking and jarring to the other person in a good way, right? It's a paradigm shift on a major scale. And so that can help ease their concerns lower their fear, anxiety, anger, whatever, and start to get them to a place of calm where you can engage them in a rational conversation, right? So that's huge right off the bat. And then make clear that the first thing we need to do is understand each other better, which again is going to be very reassuring to most people, because most people think I've got to convince you that I'm right. I'm going to get you to admit that I'm right, and you're going to give in. Instead, to say like, nope, that's not what I'm after. I want us both to understand each other, because only if we understand each other can we figure out a path forward that we both feel good about, a win-win. That's what you're after, a win-win, where both people, you're not necessarily going to get everything you want, but both people need to walk away feeling like they got something important out of this. They got a resolution that is at least satisfactory to them, right, in an important way. And if you can't find that immediately, you're going to take a pause and come back to it later and be able to think about it kind of with a fresh mind, a fresh perspective, right? But make that commitment up front and then say, look, so we have to understand each other first. So why don't you go first? Like, let the other person go. Again, reassuring to them. You're not starting off by trying to convince them that you're right. So say, look, first I want to understand you and where you're coming from. So tell me, what are you feeling? What are you thinking about this? What do you think the root cause of this conflict is? What do you feel is really important to you about this situation? Ask clarifying questions. Don't defend yourself. Don't contradict them. Don't try to counter their perspective. Don't tell them they shouldn't be feeling a certain way. Your only job during this part of the conversation is to listen empathetically so that you can try to understand them. And then by understanding them, help them feel understood, which is going to be huge for building trust and for getting them to a place where they can engage in problem solving. And then validate how they feel. And a lot of people struggle with that part because they're like, well, I don't think they should be angry. Right? This isn't about whether you think they should be angry or not. You can't tell somebody how to feel. What you can do is validate how they feel. That doesn't mean you agree that they should feel that way. It means that you understand how they feel, and you can understand, you can imagine, you can empathize with how they ended up there. You might think that they shouldn't think that way, they shouldn't feel that way. We feel the way we feel. No one can tell you how to feel, and you can't tell anybody else how to feel. And a lot of times these initial reactions to situations, they're just instinctive. People aren't choosing to get angry. So don't tell them how to feel, but do validate how they feel. Again, you're not agreeing that they should feel that way. You're understanding that they feel that way and how they got there. And that's huge. Like for most people, that is a huge part of what they want. I want to feel understood. I want my feelings validated. And then it's much easier, usually, to engage in problem solving. Now, after they feel understood and validated, and you can even, keep checking in and say, so I think you feel this way, and it's because of this, and this is the way you looked at that, and you remember things this way. Is that correct? Anything else you want to add, right? Check in with them. Make sure you're understanding things correctly, that you're hearing them correctly. That's going to help too. And then once you feel reassured that they feel understood and heard and validated, then you go, okay, I'd like to share how I'm feeling about this and my perspective. And then do your best to do that. Make I statements, right? Not, you did this. I felt this way. When this happened or when you did this, I felt this way. I was imagining this. I made this assumption. Try to make I statements and talk about how you feel rather than getting into an argument about the specifics of what happened and he said this and he or she said that and whatever. Like that's not going to get you anywhere. If you can just understand where each other's coming from, empathize with how you see things, how you each feel. Then, after you've had your chance to express your perspective and why this matters to you and how you're feeling and understanding, they may not reciprocate with the same level of understanding and validation and empathy. And that has to be okay. Like, you can't expect people to engage in this kind of process for the first time especially and do it as well as you're going to do it, right? They're adapting to your choice of how to engage in problem solving here. And it's a good one. It's a healthy one, right? It's going to serve both people's interests. But you can't expect them to just instantaneously develop incredible empathetic listening skills, right? So it's okay. But as long as you feel like you got a chance to give your perspective and that they understand you to some extent, then that's okay. That's enough, right? And then next would be, okay, so let's figure out together, what do we understand together? What do we agree on in terms of the nature of the problem? And what do we disagree on, right? Have them go first again. What do you think the actual problem is here? What's the actual nature of the conflict, right? What's the problem we need to solve, right? And again, keep using that language. Problem we need to solve together. Keep saying that. And then you may agree on all of it, or you may agree on part of it, right? That we agree that this is the problem, but this other thing, you think it's a problem, I don't. Ideally with those things, if you can deal with those second, after you've resolved the thing you agree about, then those secondary things that you don't agree on in terms of them being a problem, you could at least at that point maybe engage them in a conversation about like, okay, can we at least agree that like we may not see it the same way and we may not both agree that it's a problem, but it's important probably for whoever does see it as a problem that we try to find a solution for that. Doesn't that make sense? We don't have to agree that it's a problem or a big problem. You can try to engage them in that. But first tackle the problem or the aspects of the problem that you can agree on. And then once you've gotten there, say, okay, let's now brainstorm. Let's come up with possible solutions to that problem. And again, you can let them go first and you just go back and forth, or you can both just throw out ideas. Here's the basic ground rule, though. You can't react or respond to anybody's idea. Everything goes, no matter how crazy or weird it is. Because sometimes the craziest or weirdest, most bizarre, solution ends up becoming the kernel of the actual solution in the end. So, and you don't want to be, pissing each other off or insulting each other either. So, right, you're at a point, at this point, you've built some trust already. So let's keep going down that path. So no reaction to anybody's ideas. You're just trying to get them out. And then once you get them out, say, okay, which ones intrigue you? Which ones seem interesting to you? And let them go first again. Oh, I think this one and that one. Okay. I like that one too, and then I like this other one. And then you can kind of go back and forth a little bit. What do you think is good about that one? Great. Any concerns about that one? So think about it now. You're solving the problem together. You're analyzing. You're not criticizing people's ideas, whatever. You're just trying to have a conversation where you're teasing things out. Don't be invested in your ideas having to win. That's not the objective here. The objective is to solve the problem. It's not for your solution to be the solution. Keep your eye on the prize throughout it, right? Your objective here isn't to win every little disagreement, right? To get your version of the story right, and agreed to. That's not the point. The point is to resolve the problem, right? To heal the relationship and strengthen it. So you do the brainstorming, you tease out some of the ideas that seem intriguing to one or both of you, talk about the pros and cons, and then say, okay, like which ones do we like, or let's rank order them together, right? And see which ones we like. Again, the language, which ones we like. You're in this together. And then hopefully you can get to a place where you agree on a solution. And it could be like, hey, my favorite one is this, your favorite one is that, but this other one seems like we both were okay with it. Maybe we should go with that. That seems good enough, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. So maybe you take that third choice. And then you can get to a resolution. If you can't agree on something in that moment, hopefully it's not like absolutely life-threatening urgent in that moment. You can say like, hey, let's take a break and come back to this with a fresh set of eyes and some new thinking. And that could be in a half an hour after taking a walk or something, or it could be let's sleep on it and come back tomorrow, right? But by that point, you can probably both, withstand the lack of resolution for the moment because you've been rebuilding some trust in the relationship. It doesn't feel as critical or damaging anymore, hopefully, right? And then you might come back a half an hour later or 3 hours later or the next morning and suddenly see things differently because your emotions, are more regulated and you're able to think more clearly and your subconscious has had time to process. So that's the way I would approach difficult conversations that involve some kind of conflict, right? And those kinds of strategies, that kind of approach is good for a lot of different conversations, right? You have the other person explain their perspective. You make sure you understand it and empathize with it, validate how they're thinking and feeling. That could even be with something that, is like, how do we solve a problem at work? Same thing, right? Go through a similar kind of process, right? That kind of problem-solving process. But that language and that mindset is really what's important. We're in this together. We're on the same team. I have had clients come to me with their marriages in crisis, where they felt or feared they were headed towards divorce. And this change in mindset from I'm trying to win, you're trying to win, right? There's a win-lose, zero-sum game dynamic. And switching the mindset to we're on the same team, right? In the case of your partner, I love you. This relationship is the most important one in my life. We're on the same team, and this is a problem we're going to solve together. Let's solve it together. I'm with you on this. Game changer. Saved their marriages. And this approach towards problem solving and conflict resolution, it not only prevents more harm being done to the relationship, but it builds trust. Like that's a huge trust building exercise and mindset. So instead of making a huge withdrawal from the emotional bank account of that relationship, you're making a big deposit. You're strengthening that relationship. How about that? You can turn a conflict with somebody that you care about into a situation where you actually strengthen the relationship. It comes out stronger in the end, right? Isn't that true with a lot of difficult situations in life where we go into it afraid, anxious, right, of the harm it's going to do to us or a relationship or a situation or whatever, and we come out of it stronger? A good reminder the next time you're facing a challenging or difficult or intimidating situation or conversation. All right, let's talk about another type of difficult conversation, an awkward one. This could be about, again, a taboo topic, finances, sex, right? You name it. There are lots of situations that we can find awkward. And I think right off the bat, naming it, like saying to the other person, I need, we need to have a conversation about something, and I'm going to tell you right up front, it's kind of awkward for me, or it's challenging or difficult or uncomfortable, right? But I care about you, I care about this relationship, and we got to figure this out together. Or I want to talk about this because I think it's actually an important topic. But it's uncomfortable for me, right? Right off the bat, you're being vulnerable with them and transparent. That is going to make them probably more relaxed. It's building some trust. So they're going to be probably more open and able to engage in the conversation themselves, right? There may be a little bit of like apprehension initially. We're like, whoa, what's this going to be about, right? So, get to the chase, right? But start off by saying, just acknowledging it, labeling it, the elephant in the room. This is probably going to be an awkward conversation for both of us, right? Or at least it is for me, right? And you're asking for a little bit of compassion, right? Love, empathy from them, that this is a challenging topic for you, right? But without doing that, then we don't have the conversations about things that are actually potentially really important, right? And again, like some of this is that we might be fearing rejection or judgment, right? Because, say it's about money or it's about sex, and it may be that you're afraid that your perspective, your lack of experience, right, with either of those, money or sex, like they could judge you, right? Some people fear they're going to be ridiculed, right? Some people might think that the other person's not going to respect you as much. Label it. Say, look, I'm a little apprehensive. I don't want you to think differently of me, or I'm a little embarrassed, or whatever. Be vulnerable, and then say, but I think it's important that we talk about this. There's a pretty good chance that other person has also realized that you need to have that conversation. They may have been wanting to have it. They may have been avoiding it. And now you have, oh my God, you have relieved them of the burden, right? In a lot of cases, these awkward conversations, they're going to be relieved and grateful that you brought it up first and that you did it in this way that's very kind of vulnerable and transparent and honest. And it validates how they're feeling, because they're probably feeling awkward and uncomfortable about the conversation too. And you can even maybe have a little laugh about that. And, that's the beginning of a good conversation, right? So that would be the approach I would take towards these awkward conversations about kind of difficult, challenging topics that just, for whatever reason are either provoking a little bit of fear of rejection or judgment on our part, or are taboo in some way, right? Or we were raised to think by our parents or society or whatever that this is kind of a taboo or a private topic, and you don't really talk about that with anybody, right? And then the next thing is feedback, right? When we're in a situation where we either need to give feedback to somebody, it could be a work situation, right? Or we feel it's important to give somebody feedback, or they're asking us for feedback. And this could be a situation with a friend or a child or a spouse or a partner, right? Lots of different situations where in some way, shape, or form, we either feel like we need to or should give feedback, or are compelled to, required to, or being asked to in some way. And that can be a difficult conversation because we're afraid that the other person is going to be insulted or upset by the feedback that we offer. So, here again, I think the framing of it is important up front. To say to the other person, look, fine, I either, I want to give you some feedback, or I need to give you some feedback, or you've just asked for some feedback. If they haven't asked for it, or you're not required to give it, I would ask them first, would it be okay if I gave you a little feedback? Or would it be okay if I shared with you some thoughts about how you did that or what happened with that? Would that be okay? Would that be helpful? Right? And if they don't want it, then probably you don't give it in that moment. Right? It depends on the situation. But hopefully they'll be like, sure, like get their permission. But otherwise, it may be that you have to. They either asked or not have to. Like that might be at work, but maybe they asked you for feedback as well. And then say, okay, let me first start off with warm feedback, right? And I want to be helpful because I care about you. And so let's start off with warm feedback and give them some warm feedback first, because it opens them up to the cool feedback, right? That we are more open to cool feedback, to receiving cool feedback, if we got warm feedback first. Now, the warm feedback should be genuine, and all feedback should be ideally specific and actionable, right? So if it's warm feedback, it should be, you did this, you did it in this way, it had this positive impact. And ideally, something about how it made you feel or other people feel, right? I was very proud of you. Or, boy, you made me think differently about that, right? Or, oh, that reassured me so much. Whatever it is, because other people and we love warm feedback that is specific and actionable in the sense of being repeatable, right? And especially if it's about the impact that we had on other people in a positive way. We love it. And you know what it does? It makes us want to do more of that. So warm feedback is actually the most effective feedback to give people usually, because they will want to do that over and over again because it felt really good. So in general, often we think of feedback as negative, and we focus often on the negative feedback, right? On giving negative feedback, cool feedback. But make sure you're starting with the warm feedback, and that's the most impactful. So focus on that if you can. And then, after you've given warm feedback, if there's cool feedback to give, then give cool feedback. Again, not cold feedback, not harsh feedback. You should be kind, compassionate, but also on point, specific, and actionable. Like, here's what you did or how you did it. Here's where it could be better, right? And let's think about, or here are some thoughts on how you might approach that differently in the future, right? In ways that are actionable for them. So again, kindness, compassion, right? Not trying to make them feel bad, not delivering it harshly, but honest and specific, right? Try not to generalize. Say, like, when you did this, this is the impact it had. This is how you might do it differently in the future. Or we can talk about, like, brainstorm together. Because that's a nice thing, too. If you say, like, let's talk together. Let's do a little team building and trust building. Let's brainstorm together. And then you're treating them with respect. Like, yeah, I don't have to, like, lecture you on this or tell you what to do. Let's figure this out together. And you still get to share your advice, right, as part of the feedback. But they also get to be a partner in figuring out how to do better. And that's empowering for them as well as trust building for both of you. And so, that's an important way to approach feedback. Now, the most important thing actually in feedback is the receiving end, right? What really determines the effectiveness of the feedback is how you are at receiving feedback. And so if you're in the receiving end, don't take it personally, right? And even sometimes it can feel kind of personal, but don't. If someone's delivering it in a way that's harsh or feels judgmental, whatever, that's really about them, their style, or maybe it's about something that happened to them on the way to work that day, whatever. Try to receive it analytically, right? Let me just consider it, right? You don't have to act on any of it in the end, right? What do I think is valid? Why? What do I not think is valid? Why? What am I not sure about? I need to think about that some more, right? Ask clarifying questions, right? Just try to understand the feedback and how it might be useful to you. That's it. That's your job. So try to be open-minded, open-hearted about receiving it. Understanding that, I read someone at one point say, clear, honest feedback is an act of love. It means I care about you and I believe you can do better. I believe in you and I want you to do better because I care about you. So when you're giving it, have that mindset. And when you're receiving it, try to have that mindset. Right? These can be challenging situations for sure, but there are ways of doing them better. Look, these strategies and these mindsets, they're not going to guarantee success every time, I'm not making any promises. But these are tried and true, approaches towards having difficult conversations that in many instances are going to result in potentially dramatically different outcomes. And again, can strengthen and build trust, strengthen the relationships, right? Which is what we want, right? Keep your eye on the prize, right? Is it about winning this argument, or is it about strengthening the relationship, right? I hope that was helpful. I would love it if in your review of this episode, if you'd say, what was helpful, and if there are any difficult conversations that you've had or that you're dreading having and you want to share those, please do that as well. We'd love to sort of start a conversation about this, and maybe we can deal with some of those in future episodes. So thank you for joining us, and I hope you'll share this episode with a lot of people. I think almost everybody could use a fresh perspective on how to have difficult conversations and some new strategies. So please share this with a lot of people. And again, rate and review. Let's get some 5-star ratings on there. And follow us on social media at Integrity and Joy. And if any of this resonated with you and you'd like to talk about how one-to-one life coaching could help you, or maybe joining an integrity circle of small group of 5 to 8 people who support each other's personal and professional growth, go to integrityandjoy.com and schedule a free consultation. And we can talk about what you need to work on, what you want to work on, and how life coaching and or an integrity circle could help you on that journey. Thanks again for joining. I look forward to continuing the conversation, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks for listening. If today's episode resonated with you, imagine what we could accomplish together in a one-to-one coaching session. Visit integrityandjoy.com to learn more and book your free consultation. Let's create the life you've been striving for.